and as well the German ESA astronaut and former ISS commander Alexander Gerst. Also have a special guest today, the brand new German aerospace coordinator Anna Christmann, who will also join us later for the press briefing. And my proposal is that the Director General and our astronaut make first kickoff statements, and then we can go into a Q&A session, because you may have heard them before at the panel, but now you have the occasion for the dialogue. So I would hand over to Josef and leave the floor also for Alexander. I'll go to the side. Please, you can start, Josef.
Okay. No, thank you, Bernhard. I will be brief because you may want to ask questions, so to allow you time for questions. Just in a couple of words, 2022 will be an important year for space in Europe, and especially for the European Space Agency. We have a ministerial conference at the end of the year, and these are always extremely important moments, because with our member states, and I'm very glad to have the German aerospace coordinator with us today, Mrs. Christmann, we will prepare the proposals for the ministerial conference, of course then for subscription by the member states. So this is an extremely important moment for ESA. We have a lot on our plate. We have a very ambitious, attractive proposal which we are putting together right now in discussion with our member states. So, but this is all a process that is ongoing. Very important moment is a political milestone, the Space Summit in 3 weeks in Toulouse, 16th of February. And there, from the ESA side, I will introduce the next progress, the next steps on the accelerators and the inspirators. You have probably heard me speaking this morning, and there we have actually made quite some progress since the meeting in Portugal, in Matosinhos, where the manifest was adopted by the ministers of ESA member states, which gave me a very strong mandate to define content and funding mechanisms of these accelerators and inspirators. And this is something that we will work on for the next couple of weeks for the Space Summit, but certainly throughout the year in order to prepare them. Inspirators, very important. There's not only accelerators, but also inspirators. You know, we have 2 of them. One is a mission on a sample return mission to an icy moon, and the other one is human exploration. And I think this is the moment I would like to hand over to Alex to have a word on human exploration in particular, what it means for astronauts, but also for our planet. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Josef. Thanks for showing up here. I'm very impressed, I have to say. This is the first time that I joined this conference, and it's great to see so many very inspiring people accelerating projects towards, creating a better understanding of our planet, making sure that we can protect our planet, and also to inspire the youth. And that is indeed one of the projects that is very dear to my heart, because I saw it in my time on the International Space Station, that it's not just scientific and technology development values that we pick up. It's much more than that. It's flying to space is an endeavor that touches each human in their heart. We fly out there as friends from different continents, from different countries. Of course, we in Europe, we're a little bit more used to that, but it's great to see that you can fly with a friend from Russia, from the US, from another European country to space, and cooperate there, work together as friends, and then come back and bring inspiration back to the younger generation. That's what we see as astronauts when we go to schools, when we talk to people. We see that in their eyes. We see that people are fascinated by space, and that is due to the work that you all do here. Without you, those ambitious projects would not be underway. And we've talked before about one of the things that I found most astonishing in space projects is that there's people who decide those projects 10 or 20 years in advance with the vision. They know this can work. They believe in those projects. They have courage. They lead society towards a new project where many other people would say, no, it's too expensive, it's never going to work out, and what's the benefit of it? No, we have, for example, the International Space Station up there. Due to the courage of the leaders 20 and 30 years ago. And I see this spirit here on this conference, and that is actually, for me, very, very great to see. And I am inspired by you all here deciding on new projects, bringing new projects on the way, especially the big new ones that we know Europe needs, the accelerators and the inspirators. And I would like to start with my statement here by giving you the best regards from my friend and colleague Matthias Maurer. I talked to him a few days ago. He called me, and it's always when you see when your phone says outer space as an astronaut, you know your buddies are calling because you have the number in your phone saved. And if they call, you stop everything you do and you talk to your friend. And he asked me to give you his best regards and say thanks for working on the future of European spaceflight.
Okay, thanks for the introductory statements. I apologize if it was hard to understand with my mask. Do you have any kick-off questions to ask for both the Director General and the astronaut before any one-on-one interviews? Please, can you say where you're from? You have a microphone behind you? So the colleagues in the, actually we are being streamed as well, so people follow online a lot.
My name is Rajneesh Singh. I'm from the Parliament magazine. On Earth, we're facing so many challenges, and there's big challenges, including climate change, poverty, etc. You know, why do we need to spend billions on space when we already need to spend billions on Earth? And as Prince Harry once said, doesn't it seem a bit of a waste of money when we should be concentrating on issues on Earth?
Maybe I start, but I think the inspirational answer will come from Alex. Why do we do that? First of all, investing in space helps saving our planet, and I really mean that. There are many aspects to it. I recall the first view of our planet Earth from the moon in the 60s, 1968, when the first picture was taken. And this was a start of the climate change movement, which of course now, after decades, finally has resulted in the Paris Agreement and many other international agreements. And I think there you see that investments in space, and nobody in the 60s would have thought that this would trigger a movement to save our planet on climate change. That's one example. Of course, the other obvious example is Earth observation satellites. Today, more than half of the climate parameters are measured from satellites in space. From sea surface temperature to glacier melting, to melting of the polar ice caps, sea level rises, and so on. More than half of these parameters you can only or best measure from space. And without satellites, you wouldn't know the extent of climate change, and therefore you couldn't do decisions that are needed in order to implement them. So there are many facets of it, but I think the one who can probably most not emotionally, but most memorably mention is really Alex, when you see it out there from space. But Alex, over to you.
Yeah, indeed. What you say is very true. I mean, first of all, we don't spend the money in space, but we spend it right here in Europe, right, on new technologies. And so that's the technological part of the answer, right? Many of the technologies that we need for exploration, be it the ISS, be it Moon or Mars, because it forces us to live sustainably. On the Moon, you don't have many resources, right? There's not much you can use, and on Mars it's going to be the same. And we train that on ISS. Those technologies who force us to live sustainable, those environments who force us to live sustainable, lead us to developing technologies that we can use on Earth, things that we need to save the planet. The scientific answer, for example, we had experiments on the space station that looked into how plant roots know where up and down is. It's an answer that's been investigated a lot, but there's still no good answer. For example, that experiment was there to develop plants who can grow their roots faster downwards to find water in a dry soil. That is something that will come in very handy if climate change really changes a lot of areas that formerly were green and now they're dry. So can we adapt to that? So that's another part of the answer. But I guess in the end, and that's what Josef was referring to, it's always good if you have a problem, and I think everybody will relate to that, to take a step back, right? To look at the problem from the outside, and we can literally do that in space. And to me, it was revealing to fly to space the first time. I was a geophysicist, just like Josef. We know exactly the diameter of Earth, the thickness of the atmosphere. I thought I knew it all. What can surprise me flying to space? I saw satellite photos, but then I did see the Earth with my own eyes for the very first time, and all of a sudden, this huge, gigantic planet that I thought was infinite, maybe with infinite resources or things like that, appeared dauntingly small in the light of the blackness of infinity. And that caused me to see Earth differently, and that changes appreciation. And I think that is something that I think every human should experience once in their life. It's not going to happen that soon, but I mean, it's, you know, it's an important thing. It's an important change of perspective, and until the time where everybody can see that, we astronauts have to transport that view, that change in perspective, to bring back to Earth. And I think that generates a lot of appreciation. That's what I heard back for appreciating our planet and for solving a lot of crises on Earth.
Okay, further questions? Thank you. Friedrich? No? Okay, so maybe we'll introduce our special guest from Germany, Anna Christmann from the German federal government. Please come over.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I just learned I have two things in common with Alexander Gerst. It's my first conference here in space, and I'm very happy to meet everyone. And I also had the chance to have a call with Matthias Maurer from the ISS, who gave me a very warm welcome also to the space community. So I'm really looking forward to working in this community. And as a new government in Germany, we have also set a new priority on aerospace policy. We want to start a new strategy for aerospace this year, to develop it and to have it finished hopefully by the end of the year, what our priorities will be from the German side. And of course, the climate crisis will be one of the top priorities. We just heard it. I see space and aerospace as one key area where we can fight climate crisis, because we develop very important technologies. We learn a lot. We learn a lot about how climate is changing and what we can do on Earth to prevent climate crisis, and also to live better at it by, for example, identifying problems in forests, things like that. So I think it's a very important sector also from a green perspective. Other priorities will be, of course, to work for a joint Europe in the space sector, to have a strong European ecosystem with also startups in it, with a very innovative ecosystem, so that Europe can play a global role in the space sector. That is also a very important issue. And maybe last point for now is the whole issue of space traffic management I'd like to mention, because we see space is getting more crowded, but we want to find joint rules to have clear rules how we also secure a sustainable orbit that can be used by everyone and that is safe for our astronauts and all the assets in space. So I'm looking very much forward to work with everyone here at the conference and with ESA especially, and to have further exchange with our astronauts. I'm looking forward to all the work that is coming.
Thank you. Joseph, maybe you want to make a statement on ESA and its member states. We have now one member state, but we are a special organization, maybe in this political environment.
Yeah, maybe it is worth just to recall, as Bernhard is pointing out, how ESA works and what our strength is, and our strength really is our member states. We have just the pleasure of hearing the new German aerospace coordinator, a very strong member state in ESA in many domains, especially on climate-related issues, a very strong investor in space. And this is really the way how we work, that we listen to our member states, that we ask them for their priorities, and you are defining yours now this year. And based on these priorities, we put then together a program that meets the various expectations of the member states. It's sometimes tricky, I tell you, meeting the expectation of 22 member states, but that's the way we do it since 5 decades now. And I think overall it has worked pretty well, because the programs we have put in place have always been the result of a long, intense discussion that goes over a year and a half, in order to formulate these programs, and then obviously put them on the table on the day of the ministerial and ask the member states to kindly look at them and subscribe them according to their preferences, which they have worked out throughout the year. So this is really recipe that works well, and as I say, over the last decades, but that doesn't mean that we can continue the same way in the next decades, or we have to really also adjust our way of working, and certainly we get completely new impulses that we need to take care of, commercialization being one of them, more greener use of space, digital commercialization, as we call it, transformation. ESA as an organization are top priorities for me, and this is also part of the process with which we are working with our member states.
Okay, thank you, Josef Aschbacher. Thank you, Mrs. Krittmann. Krittmann, we have one question from the online audience from Karl Urban, I believe, from
Karl
Deutschland
Urban. We
Radio.
would like to give the floor to Karl Urban.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Karl Urban. I'm a freelancer for the German Public Radio. I've one question to both of you. So, as I understand it, Josef Aschbacher has been campaigning for renewed human spaceflight program from ESA, and also the idea of developing maybe a launching possibility from Europe, so launching humans to space. So my question is, what are the main arguments for two ministers from the member states to get there? Because right now the human space program in ESA is a small fraction, and possibly you need more money for that, and there are a lot of areas where more investment is needed right now. And the other question is to Anna Christmann. So how is your party, the Green Party, so what is its position towards human spaceflight?
Maybe I start. I will be brief, but I think what you mentioned is absolutely right, that we are at the moment discussing the topic of, we call it human exploration, by the way, it's not space flight, which is a big difference, because human exploration means that we are seeing the next economic zone as the zone of activity, and not only the rocket or the ship to go there. And there's many facets that are related. But let me just make one thing crystal clear. We are not asking today for any decision, and not in the Space Summit in 3 weeks, on this regard, on this topic. What I would like to launch is a debate with politicians across Europe to see what Europe wants to do. Because you have to realize that in 10 years from today, for example, the space station will be not existing. Well, it may exist still, but it will certainly, according to current plans, not be the same space station as we know it today. NASA has just extended until 2030. I've yet to ask my member states for participation on this extension. But let's assume that it goes up to 2030, but then we do not know. There may be a commercial way of having space stations or something similar. And my argument is that we need to prepare for this time to come, to see what Europe wants to do. Don't forget that everything we want to achieve in 2030, we have to start discussing now and to decide very soon. So that's why we need this dialogue. But what I would hope is that I get feedback from the politicians to start working on it, and then obviously come back maybe in a year's time, maybe later, with some decision points or facts which we have to collect. But at the moment, I would like to raise the debate in order to have a good discussion based on facts and different arguments which are on the table.
Yeah, for me it's very relevant what Europe's role in space will be in the future, and I think it should be an important role, and I think it's a great idea to have a dialogue on how this role can be in the future. I mentioned already some of our priorities, but I think it's good to have the bigger picture. Space is changing right now. We have lots of new actors. We will have a change in maybe how space stations will be run in the future, and I think it's correct that we as Europe should find our own way how we can be part in the space sector in the future. And so I look forward to have this dialogue in the next years and see what our role can be. I think it cannot be a copy of other ways we see on the world, but it should be a European way that is based on sustainable sustainability questions, and on the question what can be our own European approach to explore space.
Is another question addressed to you, Anna?
It's from Peter de Sterling, space expert journalist, well informed.
If
We
I
will
don't
ask
mind,
it online,
Peter, I
probably
will-
just to, I guess, Josef and you. Peter, can you hear us?
Peter, can you hear us? Would you like to speak, or shall I read your question?
Go ahead and read it to Madam Christman in case my audio is not.
I read your question. For Anna Christmann, in general, should we expect continuity in German space policy, or does your government see any big changes to the policy? You have only a few months to prepare for the ESA Council meeting.
Ministerial Council meeting.
Yeah, I think we are well preparing us now for the council meeting in November, and I think it's a mix of continuity and maybe some new things we emphasize even more. That would be clearly, I think, all the questions around Earth observation and how we can use space for fighting climate crisis. But for example, also the ambitions of Germany to push for ecosystems that includes also SMEs and startups is I think something that has already been done in the last years, and I'm happy to push these kind of questions for an innovative system further.
Okay.
There's a question, sorry, to the astronaut, Alexander. What would you recommend the new German government to build up a green space policy? What would be your main recommendation?
Well, the way I see it is that spaceflight is very green. We see that with the benefits that we have from it. We talked about it before. Many of the scientific experiments that we conduct are made to make life on Earth better and to be more sustainable. The same with exploration. From the moon we can learn how to better protect Earth. It forces us to think that way, to be more sustainable. And that's why, to me, exploration is, by definition, and we saw that in the last decades, very green already. And I think that is something we need to invest in. That is one thing. The other thing is that we do see the international landscape right now changing. It's going to be less institutional cooperation between large continents or nations. It's more on the commercial basis, and that is something we need to watch. We need to adapt to the new game, and that might leave us in a situation where we are more and more dependent on services, commercial services from other nations that we might not necessarily have control over. That means we are not necessarily sure that our priorities will be looked after. And that is, in my opinion, a very good reason to be more independent, to also count more on the European way, as Ms. Christmann said. That is very important in my opinion, but it also means that we need to make sure that we invest more, because we've seen what we got out in the past. Now we are in the golden age of ISS utilization, meaning we get a lot of results back, which is return of investment phase. Not only economically, people have calculated that you get a 2-in-1 return for every euro you spend in human spaceflight, even in human exploration even. But it means that we need to, and it's wise, to invest more and look into the future much more.
Thorsten and then Karl Urban again.
Hallo.
Spacewatch Global.
Hello, Thorsten Krenning, Spacewatch Global. My question goes to Mr. Aschbacher. You talked about the priorities you have, and they are really complex, and I don't want to be in your shoes for setting priorities, but we are talking about security in space, space sustainability, and space traffic management, to take it in one area. So how do we tackle that in Europe? I mean, we have this clear space, obviously a few projects, highlight projects that go that way, but seeing the amount and seeing the recent Russian ASA test, we are running behind. That's how it feels. So how can we speed it up?
Yeah. No, you are absolutely right. We are running behind, and sometimes people would say we are flying blind or half blind, which is true. And in fact, I've just the honor of having Rolf Denzing here, the director in charge of operations, who will who on a daily basis is dealing with debris and collision avoidance maneuvers, because they are happening and they're very much a fact of reality today. And we have actually quite often very important encounters where we need to really take serious measures in order to avoid collisions. So this is happening. So what do we propose? First, I have a policy in ESA which is that by 2030 we would like to have sustainability also in orbit. What does that mean? If we bring an object up, we want to bring one down to have a net zero pollution in the literal sense of objects in space. So this is certainly a commitment I would like to take on the side of ESA, to make sure that our satellites are equipped with a deorbiting mechanism in order to do that. Or even, and we have another mission, as you know, that is allowing to embrace another object. In this case, it's an upper stage of a Vega, to bring it down out of the orbit into a lower bar. So this is work that we are performing. We also invest in in-orbit servicing and other activities that keep our orbits clean as possible. However, and you mentioned it yourself, it's extremely important to know what's going on. That means you have a system in place of awareness, and then obviously a system that allows to manage traffic also up there, not only down on the ground or in the air, but also in space. And this is something that we need to build up together. You have heard Commissioner Breton this morning mentioning this as a priority also for the Commission. On the ESA side, we will work hand in hand with the Commission to provide technology developments to the Member States, to the Commission. Of course, this goes with other partners, and this is certainly something that we need to do in Europe, just to not fly blind and to know what's happening and to protect ourselves as much as we can.
Next question, follow-up question of Karl Urban, and after Karl, Peter inside GNS. Please unmute your microphone. Karl, you have the floor.
Thank you. I want just to follow up on the idea Alex Gerst mentioned that spaceflight already is green somehow because there's many benefits for Earth. On the other side, space is an industry, and each rocket launch has some impact on the atmosphere, for example, or each satellite orbiting into the atmosphere. And this is not, for climate, for example, this is not a big issue right now compared to other industries like aerospace industry, but this might change in the near future. So what is your idea for how to reduce the footprint of the space industry and not increase it?
You already gave a very inspiring answer before. I think that hit it right on the...
Maybe I'm very quick, but the question was to Alex. But if you remember the Agenda 2025, which we have introduced a bit less than a year ago, is actually putting a huge focus on a greener use of space. We call it the green commercialization. And this really is what I mean, that whatever we do, we look for the most sustainable way of doing it in order to also cater to our political priorities which we have in Europe, which is to have a greener Europe, carbon neutrality by mid of this century as a guiding principle. And yes, our actions are geared towards this. I have a very concrete target which I've put into the Agenda 25, which says that by 2030 we would like to reduce the carbon footprint of ESA by 46.2% in order to also do our share of decarbonization. But over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I don't have much to add there. It is important that if we, and I said that before, right? If every human will see the Earth from the outside, I think there's a lot of good coming out of that because it gives us a different perspective. It gives us a different appreciation. And of course, at the same time, you're completely right that we need to find the fuels and the technology to do that in a sustainable way. Otherwise, we would go the same route as aviation history. But I think, it is a doable technological task. So our engineers are working on that, and I agree with you that this is a very important thing.
Maybe if I may just add one more point. In fact, to pick up what Mrs. Christman was saying before, that we need to do space the European way. So if we engage in new, bigger programs, there will be a European way of doing it. It's not a copy of somebody else's program. And I think that's a very important statement that I have just heard, and certainly willing to pick it up in this context. And this has probably much more to do with sustainability than maybe we would expect. So this is certainly a guiding principle I'd like to pick up for our preparations of the ministerial conference.
Okay.
And please, Peter, inside GNS.
Peter, what last name? Does he have a last name?
Peter
Last name, Peter from Inside?
from inside GNS. He will introduce himself. Peter, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, yeah, Peter Gutierrez from Inside GNSS Magazine. I'm asking everyone the same question. It's really just to get your ideas. It's probably not a top priority for ESA. It's a question about jobs in Europe. So I think the Europe 2020 strategy calls for 30 to 40% of Europeans should have a university degree. That's not the number now, but it should be up to 40%. That means 60% should not have a university degree. These people need jobs. Is there anything in the European space programs? Is there an initiative, or is there any way that ESA can contribute to creating new jobs for these, let's say, lower skilled people? A lot of unemployment, of course, is a big challenge today, and we have autonomous systems and automation, which are a challenge in that area. Yeah, just your ideas on that question of, and for, let's say, average Europeans.
Okay, very briefly on creating new jobs and getting people to study and have a university degree and therefore be attracted to space. As you know, we have a number of activities in ESA to really have STEM education supported. We have an education office, we have many projects where we do that. But I think the maybe newer ones and the bigger ones which we are engaging in are the inspirators, and the inspirators literally want to inspire people with what we do. Human space, human exploration is one of them. IC Moon, I mentioned, is another one. But what we really want to do there is to engage a new community, a new group of people to study in STEM disciplines and therefore in space, and therefore attract them also to this kind of activities. So certainly the inspirators are serving, apart from technology development and the science which we discover and so on, certainly also inspire people and get them into STEM education. And the other one is the accelerators. The accelerators are new dimensions of programs. They may be future flagship programs, but they will be huge major activities. They're focused today a lot on the green agenda on climate change. The first one on space for a green future, the second one on rapid and resilient crisis response, again, mostly triggered by climate crisis. This will open completely new domains outside the space domain, new areas where a lot of technology or engineering or IT education is required. So yes, also with the accelerators, we really would like to foster STEM education and attract young talents and young people.
Maybe I'd like to add one point, and I agree with lots of what has been said by Josef Aschbacher, but I think to get more people into STEM education and to have more people who would like to go in this area of space is also to don't forget the women, what I would like to add. Because I'm very much engaged in the question generally to get more women in STEM education, and I think also space should be a sector where we should have more female astronauts in future, and I'm very happy that it's coming already more and more, and so I just wanted to add this aspect that we should engage in education also with this gender aspect.
Fully agree. Maybe one number I would like to say, because this is such an important topic. As you know, in the astronaut call we had close to 23,000 applications. In the first round we had 24% women. Now in the next round, where we have reduced it to 1,400, roughly 1,300 something candidates, the share of women has increased from 24 to 39%. So you see, ladies are very competitive, very successful in these competitions, and I'm very happy to see that, because I fully agree with what you say. We need more women in space or in STEM in general, and also more women astronauts. So very happy to hear that.
And looping that one back, we had a discussion over lunch where we found out that many of us had the famous Apollo 8 photo of the Earthrise above the moon hanging above their bed, including me. So that made me realize that what inspired me to study, become a scientist at first, and then get into human spaceflight was really the inspiration I got from the generation before. Really, those folks who flew to space back then, the new perspectives they brought back to Earth, that really did inspire me to get into that STEM education. And so what we're trying to do is really to pass that on to the next generation.
If I may comment on this, at 14:30, you've heard about it, there's actually an all-female press panel of 3 ESA directors, Geraldine Najar, Simonetta Kelly, and Elodie Viau, who are all 3 board members who are fantastic colleagues who will discuss and show a bit of female power in European space. So we are on it also on the board level.
Great.
I think you need to sneak out now. Maybe we have a quick picture with the 2 gentlemen, and then we continue with a question from Alexander Stern, if you don't mind, with a bit of sanitary distance with guests. Alexander, or in the DG?
Lady in the middle, no, lady.
Lady in the middle?
Ladies.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Danke.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On l'aura dans le chat, on l'aura. Okay, good. Dankeschön, bis bald. So, there was one more question in the online. You know, we still have dozens of journalists listening to us online. There's Alexander Stern from Süddeutsche Zeitung has a question. Can we hear him?
Alexander, takes it
Can you hear me?
Okay, can you raise the sound a bit? On peut lever le
Yes, sure. Just a brief question for Alexander Gerst. You're doing strategic work for ESA now. You've been on this conference doing a keynote. You have been elected by the Green Party in Germany for the assembly that's going to elect the next president. Are you pursuing a career in politics, or let's put it another way, how important is space policy these days?
Thank you. No, I'm not pursuing a career in politics. After all, I'm still in the astronaut corps, so that's why I'm here. I think, space is something that provides a different perspective. We've talked about this today a lot, and that is the part of why we are here. We want to provide this perspective to the people that benefit from it, and also the people who are here who have the ambitious task to bring the space program forward. So we would like to add this perspective, and that is something that we found, that humans relate to humans. It matters to us if something that we see was taken by a camera, a satellite photo, or on the computer on a satellite view, or if a human saw something and tells us how it is. And that is one of the big tasks that we astronauts have, to pass that message on, as long as other people cannot see it themselves. And that's why I think it's a very important part of our work to come to these events and show people that what they're doing actually matters, actually brings back benefits to Earth, and what they're bringing on their way now will matter in 10 years from now. And it's actually not only that it matters, but it's actually vital and critical.
Okay, further questions? Are we good?
No, I have a lot of questions, but it's not the time to.
Okay, we have some individual.
Will you announce this female directors slot?
Yes. So if we are done at this stage with the Q&A session, I thank you very much, those who've come here and those who are listening to us online, for your participation. We still have the possibility of a few individual interviews. I know some are also waiting for this here, especially TV people. That's great. Thank you for your numerous participations. And yes, please remember, at already 14:30, very soon, we have another ESA press briefing. We do this here as well, or at the press area of the colleagues next door, where we have the 3 female directors, as I mentioned, Elodie Viau, Simonetta Kelly, and Geraldine Najar. Also 3 really exceptional ladies and interesting management team members at ESA. Thank you very much, and keep in touch.
Thank you, Bernhard.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alex.
Josef, du musst jetzt weg, du hast Termin oder hast du noch ein kleines bisschen Zeit?
Musst nur mal schauen.
Ich glaube, du bist zu.